All right, so we're live. And Max, thank you very much for agreeing to join me on this call on this strange little venture that I'm doing here. I decided after seeing you post on LinkedIn, I think like 2 or 3 weeks ago, you shared this like beautiful graphic about how you take like one kind of video concept and bring it down and make multiple videos out of that. And seeing that concept visualized really struck a chord with me. And I was like, that is an amazing system, framework, visualized for other people to see. And I loved it. And it wasn't just me. I saw so many other people commenting on it and being like, wow, this is great. And that kind of sparked the idea for me to dig into these frameworks a little bit more. So because you were the person that kind of kicked off this idea in my mind, I wanted to interview you directly, learn a little bit more about your story, kind of where you came from, and really dig into this framework that you've developed for your video production company. So just to give a little introduction, Max Lord, he is the founder of Bridged Media, which is based out of Leeds, England. Max, what kind of video production do you guys specialize in?
So we specialize primarily in brand videos. People call them either brand story videos, testimonial videos, and then social media content. So they're kind of like the three products that you make. But in the video world, you know how it is. It's you can make the core things, but there's all sorts that you can get introduced to. It could be process videos, or it might be events, things like that. It depends on the client and what their needs are. But primarily, I think brand videos is the bread and butter of what we like to create for clients. The one that if we were to go into a meeting and want it, we know exactly how to structure it, make it, deliver it, all that good stuff, basically. So yeah, I'd say that's kind of our bread and butter video content.
Awesome. And this is why I think we're going to have a good conversation. In my video production company, we focus mostly on the same things. And for context, Max and I are in a Facebook group, which is how we met. It's a Facebook group for video business owners. And I've been connected with you for quite some time, but this is the first time we're actually having a conversation across the water, across the pond. So it's really good to be able to connect. Yeah.
Like an uncanny valley, isn't it? It's like,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
Are we real right now?
Yeah, it's so bizarre. I've been interacting with you for quite a long time, and I've heard your voice, but I've never actually spoken with you. So this is really cool. Okay, cool. So that is the focus for the video production that you guys do. How did you get into video production as a whole? Like, what was your background before video?
So my journey into video was I never thought I had a creative bone in my body. Like through high school, through a little bit in college. Like my college that I went to go into IT technician in, which is, fixing computers and smartphones, and realized very quickly I hated it. But during that time, I started working in the family business for a little bit. And when I hit my 20s, I went to live in Southeast Asia. I was doing predominantly, the reason I went over there wasn't just to, the classic kind of discover myself and all this. I was part of a Christian work. So I was doing like a Bible education work at the time. That was kind of my focus. And I took a DSLR with me, like you do. And then just started putting these little videos together, learn how to edit on like a £150 or $200 laptop, which just couldn't handle Premiere Pro. But when I was over there, I just understood the idea of capturing something, putting it together, and fell in love quite quickly with the idea of building a story, combining it with music, adding, I don't know, just putting something together which I really enjoyed, I could share with people, and they enjoyed it as well. So, started off in kind of travel videos or travel experience videos, things like that. But then I got introduced to a good friend of mine who was a professional photographer. And so he would have these kind of wedding shoots, couple engagement shoots at like elephant sanctuaries and these beautiful places in Thailand. And I'd kind of join along with him. And during that process, I started figuring out, okay, this is how I could maybe make some money doing this, like photographing or doing video with couples, things like that. And then eventually on Facebook, there was an entrepreneur who had built a tool for physiotherapists who was asking for a videographer to do a product video, more or less. And to be honest with you, I just said I'd give it a go. I had no idea what I was doing. Like, he came in there, he had his notes laid out exactly how he wanted the video being made. I was super fortunate because I had no idea what it's like to work with a client. It was a hobby. It was an absolute hobby at that time. But working with this guy and having him kind of take the lead almost showed me, oh, so you can actually work for businesses making videos. And I just quoted a number. I think it was like 300 or 400 quid at that time, which I thought was like just mind-blowing amount of money for what my skill level was. And yeah, it worked out really well. He used that video, ironically, for social media ads. And if you go on his website now, he still uses the same terrible video that that I made like 5 or 6 years ago, at least in my opinion. And that was the very first time I was like, okay, I can work for businesses making videos. And that kind of set off the trajectory of, okay, I know what I love, and I know that you can make money doing this. I need to figure out how to turn this thing into a business. And so when I came back home to England, that kind of set me on that trajectory, really. That's where I was like, right, I need to figure this out. Not just my skill in video, but skill in building a small video company, basically, which a little bit terrifying, but it was the path. And it's kind of that thing clicked. I was like, I need to follow this through, basically.
That's amazing. The more that I connect with video business owners, the more I hear the story of like, oh, I didn't go to film school. I had this other path that went like this, and then I discovered video, and then I discovered I could do something with the video. Where I like to think, like in business, the best businesses are where you can figure out what you really want to do, but also figure out what people really need, and then find something in the middle where everyone is happy and it's a win-win. And it sounds like that's what you discovered. Is that right?
100%. I mean, when I first took on that client, I was very fortunate that he was like, he'd already built a business. He already knew exactly what he wanted. And coming to me, he had the roadmap laid out. So my first ever client was a really good experience, but one I was completely out of my depth with. But during that whole thing, and after completing it and putting it together and figuring out how do I add lower thirds, what's lower thirds to a video, in all this stuff, the finished video now still earns him money. Like during Black Friday, I get that ad for his product from 5 years ago from the video that I made. So it's a bit weird. I'm thinking, man, that 300 quid I charged or whatever, I'm like, I should have charged a bit higher. But I think just that first experience of click, I can do what I love and people appreciate it and get paid at that time, I thought really well for it as well. It's a really cool thing to happen. And then I think that feeling spurs you on to then, okay, what's the next kind of challenge or hurdle? I know I can figure it out, move on to the next one, the next challenge. And you go from there, basically. And I don't think that actually stops, to be fair. You just keep on moving up, but it has to start somewhere. And that's kind of where it started for me, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. As soon as you see the click, this is what, in my opinion, this is what sets entrepreneurs apart, is they learn to look out for that click, or to kind of listen for that click. And then when they get it, even if it's only 300 quid or something small, they look at that and they say, that is enough proof for me to see this through and go in on this. So it was pretty similar to me. Like the first video that I did, I didn't even charge for it, but I saw them share it online and put it out there, and the reception I got from it. And then I remember it clicked for me when similarly, like I saw the video like a year later, 2 years later, and I was like, wow, that effort we put in that one day is now benefiting that business, for the rest of time, basically. So yeah, super cool. I totally resonate with that. That's awesome. Okay, so how long ago was that when you first started?
Good question. I was over there in 2017 to 2018. So I'd probably say 2018. So what's that? 5 years ago now?
5 years.
Yeah, about okay. 5 years ago. Yeah.
So you came back home, you built the business out, and it's been running for a couple of years. It is the business. It's just you as the main person right now, right? And then you work with contractors, I assume, for certain
Yeah,
projects.
I bring on. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that business model. That's the way that I built my production company as well. Company of one, but bring in really good talent for editing or audio and stuff like that. So yeah, super cool. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the kind of results that you have seen in your business. So I'm going to leave this as an open-ended question, but you can cover, whether it's like how many clients that you're taking on per year, or you can talk a little bit about the revenue that you're seeing, whether that's like a yearly accumulative, or whether that's like, we went from 300 quid projects to now our average project is X. Paint me a picture of what kind of results that you're seeing this year compared to that first year in business.
Ooh, good question. I think this year, what we've had to do as a business, I think over the past 6 months, has been one of the biggest learning curves in my business career over the past 6 months, really, which is changing the model in which I deliver the product in. So when I started off, you're finding your feet, you're just happy to take on work. But then you start figuring out, okay, how do I charge properly for that work? How do I learn to sell? How do I learn to communicate value? And so the first 2 years of my video business was really a bit of a challenge in terms of just learning how to generate clients and get clients. And bear in mind, I started in March 2020. I got married in March 2020. And the day of my wedding, the next day was lockdown. So I had 2 clients all lined up, and they both, my first big clients, right? They both came around and said, sorry, pause. Like everybody just went to pause. And thankfully, I was able to keep the boat afloat as a newly married person with rent and things, with another business that was kind of working in tandem with. At that time, the video business was more like a side hustle, almost like that kind of side. But then during the first kind of year, latter end, when lockdown kind of eased, we started getting some good client wins then. So I think at that time, I was, really aiming to charge anywhere between £1,500 to like 2,500. That was like my range for the first year and a bit. That was kind of like, if a project came in, that was the benchmark. And I think from there, it's been my job to really level that benchmark up and up and up and raise it higher and higher, to the point where, a minimum project now is going to be anywhere between £4,000 to £5,000. Like that is the minimum. That's kind of the number I will say very quickly out of the gates, just to gauge that they're in that range to begin with. And if not, then we can either pass them on to somebody else or help them out in, simpler ways potentially. But for substantial projects, that's where we're at. So I guess in terms of the business growth, I can't really give a reliable kind of 1 year, 1, 2, 3 because of COVID when we started off, but at least over the past 2 years, we've grown in terms of our ability to just say, look, this is how much we charge. Take it or leave it necessarily. It depends on them. But usually we're talking to businesses that are comfortable in that area as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I'd say our bench line is. But the past 6 months, rather than doing single one-off projects, the big learning curve now has been switching our model more to retainer type models. So monthly occurring revenue, which is been one of the most significant learning curves of my career, or doing this or running the business, which is managing cash flow, making sure, bills are paid, freelancers are paid, that I'm paying myself enough, that I'm investing in the business. Switching that model over the past 6 months to monthly recurring content for our clients has been a bit of a game changer, and we're still learning, but that's been one of the big kind of newer developments for Bridge Media so far.
Awesome. I love that. Like I can attest, like as someone who has run their own video company, when the projects are coming in and it's
happy days,
it's happy days, but then with every freelancing type gig, there's ups and there's downs, and it teaches you really quickly that you need to save those up. So when you're in the valleys that you can get through. But one thing that I think a lot of creatives really crave is that consistency with still having control over, where they work, how they work, what type of work they do. So it's kind of like the consistency of a job without having a job, and you still get the flexibility of having your own business. So do you mind if I ask you what prompted that transition? Like what was the catalyst that caused you to go down that route? And what are some of the biggest things that you learned in that transition?
Yeah, sure. So you've already mentioned it really. It came down to feast and famine. So the problem with running a single person business, and I think it is one of the single biggest challenges I think single business owners have is you need to wear all these hats, right? You need to be the salesperson, the marketer, the project manager. Even in our world, that would be potentially the videographer. It might be the editor. It might be the strategist, all this stuff, right? And so I learned how to kind of delegate those hats a bit more. But the challenge I found was, okay, I would get the business, happy days, comfortable size project. Like I say, we learned how to quote well enough now, 4 or 5K, but we'd be so invested in that project for that client that my attention span would just be like zoned in on them. And so usually a project, in my experience, has a kind of a lifetime value of about 3 months from, hey, Max, Bridge Media, we've got an idea for a video. Can you help us, to production in the second month, potentially to third, which is actually it's live and it's implemented. It's kind of this 3-month window. And
Right.
I'd find myself doing these 3-month kind of windows, but then there'll be gaps between the two. And so your financial situation is kind of doing this motion. And that's very stressful. That's not fun. Like, it's great up here, but then it's like, oh, we finished it all. And I need to, I think one of the hardest things as well is, okay, you finished this project, you've done the work, and now it's handed over. The adrenaline kind of comes down a bit because it's like you're so focused and you're loving it, but now it's out there, it's done its thing, and you're excited to see the results and it's working for the client, happy days. But then you're kind of like, oh, right, okay, I need to gear up and try find the next client or reach out to a previous client. And it's like you have to kind of come down on it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So your motivation behind the work drops after you've finished off the project delivery.
Right.
And it's like, all right, I have to gear into another mode now, which is marketing and sales. And to be fair, I love both modes. I love doing work. I love doing the editing. I love it. I genuinely do. It's why I got into it. And I also enjoy sales and marketing. Like I don't know if it's, some people are very either or, but I find myself, and maybe you find this as well, I'm very comfortable wearing both the creative hat, but also the business hat. Like I don't mind it. I enjoy both. I thrive off both, to be fair. But when you're doing from one to the other, it can be a little bit draining emotionally as well. So I just found that in my business over the past 2 years, I was like going through this motion. And then financially as well, you're starting to realize, okay, we're good here. Bills are paid, happy days, savings here and here, but then it dips and you're like, oh man, the anxiety comes, the pressure to get the next thing. And it just creates a bit of a loop. So that's something I've just had to learn over the past year or so, just to sit back and think, hang on, am I running the show properly? Like, am I actually doing this? Because okay, I'm getting work, I'm getting projects, and I'm quoting well enough, but this seesaw motion is just a bit draining after a while. So that's what prompted me to really think, okay, I need to change the model. I need to change the process in which I go about my content now.
So how did you do that? Like, how did you, for, let's say there's people out there who are running their business and they're doing these one-off videos, which I think is probably the majority of video businesses these days. How did you kind of switch your mentality from like, okay, let's do one to let's do many? And how did you approach that transition with your clients? Did it happen? Like, did you go back to your clients and say, hey, now that we have this video, there's all of these other opportunities that we've uncovered during this process? Or was it more of a case where, okay, the next lead that came your way, instead of pitching one video, you're like, actually, let's look at a more holistic view of how video can fit in your business? How did that transition look like?
Yes. So I would say the answer to that question is both. So usually a client comes in fresh, say it's someone I've never talked to before, we've not worked with them before, they're fresh off, it's a lead from a referral or LinkedIn, or even if I've outreached to them and I've got, their interest, that initial sales conversation, I try to identify as many pain points as we can in that conversation as possible. And sometimes they might come to me with, we've got this idea for a video, we've got this one thing we want to make. And it's my job in that process to really delve into, okay, there's this one thing, what are you trying to solve with that one big idea? Like, kind of get excited with them, understand it. But the reason I want to do that is I'm trying to string out as many pain points as I can find as reasonably possible, and even ask supplementary questions like, okay, what about your hiring? What's going on there? Or what about your social media strategy? What's going on there? And just be curious, so I can at least exit the conversation with video content ideas with the big one that they have in mind. So when it comes to someone who kind of fresh like that, I tend to move them onto the proposal section. So once I've understood what they're after, and maybe suggested, do you mind if I just suggest maybe some content ideas as well? In the proposal, I now suggest kind of 3 packages that they can look at. So package 1, the big idea that they came in, I've had my thoughts on it. Package 2, big idea, here's these other videos that's going to help you with this thing that you mentioned and this thing that you mentioned. And then package 3, all of the above, most likely with additional social media content underneath that, layering it. And so with that fresh lead, or with that fresh kind of client, they get that kind of 3 packaged system, which I then say to them, look, I know it's a big investment. Let's split it over a few months. Let's split this and make it a long-term kind of investment, so it's easier for yourself, but also for us as a video content creator. As we're creating the content, we know how to work with you a bit more, like fluently now, if that makes sense. So we can understand your business a bit more. So that's kind of how I come to it with one single client, that I say to them, 3 package options, but let's split it over a few months, so it's not just one big solid slump. And that helps me as a business kind of manage the content flow, the cash flow as well. So that's one area. And then the second area that you mentioned, say it's repeat clients that I've already worked with. I already know their pain. I already know what's going on in their business. I already know what channels, what social media that they're using. For example, recently, one of our main clients is a luxury care home. We started off working with them, creating a brand video, which then led to a process video. That was kind of the big idea, the package video. Once we completed that, I came back to them and said, you've got an audience. The family members of your residents who stay in this luxury care home are your audience, but they're your biggest sales force as well. Your referrals are so valuable to your business that, who doesn't have an elderly parent, or who do they not know who's got an elderly parent? Because their parents in your facility, they know others in their zone who are going to refer you, right? Let's nurture that audience whilst using the content that we make to use as fresh marketing material as well. So we kind of came in with a fresh idea to say, look, we can string together a 6-month contract with, say, 3 or 4 videos a month, and there'll be X amount for, say, 3 months, and then a little bit less for, say, six months content. So we come to them already with kind of an idea in mind to help their business and their kind of social media strategy going forward, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's kind of how we go about it with already existing clients. We already know what they're going through. So we can say, look, I've got these 3 videos that will serve your business continually every single month. And because we've worked with each other, we know how simple it is we've already got the relationship. So when it comes to production, editing, implementation of the content, we already know how to work with each other, really. So that's kind of the 2 methods we go about it, really.
I love that. I'm gonna take a pause right here. I have a couple questions that I want to ask you. I've realized that this is going to go longer than I anticipated, because I like talking to you, and I like the way your brain works. I think we look at things very similarly. When I'm hearing you describe your process and like how you go through it and everything, I'm like, well, to be fair, we both like kind of started around the same time as well. We started, then lockdown. I moved in with my girlfriend around that same time, all that pressure. So there's there's a lot of similarities there. But anyways, I'm going to quickly sign into my Zoom account and just upgrade it and get this done and over with.
I'm getting you to spend $14 out of it.
Yeah, it's okay. They give me a 50% off voucher if I upgrade right now. So
well, there you go. They know what they're doing, don't they? They know the game.
Yeah. Oh, the coupon code is come back now. Oh, okay.
That's nothing. That's motivation if you need it. Yeah, it's very funny that I found this with a few in the group actually. We like Ash, like we both started around the same time as well. I mean, one thing I think you've brought to the table, which I've purchased this, but also I'm looking to buy the template as well, and that's kind of third or fourth quarter this year is website. That's like I'm tired of hunting now.
Yeah.
I'm tired of hunting. It's time to start just have a nice wide open net. But that's another conversation for another time.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can talk about that. Yeah, I can dig into that all day. That is, I think that is like the one thing that I did where, so I want to talk to you a little bit about like your 80-20 tasks. So like, what are like the small things that you did that ultimately had a really big impact? But one of like the thing for me that was like, I put in a tiny amount of work and got monumental impact was the website and the SEO. And it was completely on accident. Like, it wasn't like this thing where I was like, I will build this lead machine. It was like, I don't know. I think I need a website and like, I'm kind of visual, so I can put it together. And then, yeah, when leads were coming in, I was like, oh, okay, this is what happens. And then I asked my other video friends, they're like, no, I've been doing this a couple of years. That doesn't happen. I was like, oh, okay. So I think I have something interesting here. But yeah, we can dig into that. Okay, so I'm gonna get back to the call. This call has unlimited minutes now. Thanks, Zoom. Okay, so I love that. That is amazing. There's so many things there that I want to touch on before we move into some of the other stuff. So the first one is I just want to call out how you move into the proposal section. Actually, before that, I want to call out the fact that you ask questions in the meeting, in the client meeting. So this is something that I see a lot of people forget to do or like kind of minimize the importance of it. So if a client comes to you and they have this great idea for a video, well, we know it's not often a great idea, but we listen to it anyways. And, we'll give them what they want. But it is our job as professionals to look at that idea, evaluate it, look at all of the other things that are going on in their business and give them, feedback and say like, hey, okay, we can do this if you really want, you're the business owner. But where I really see a lot of value is in these other things. And here's how it could work. One thing, it took me a long time to kind of come to terms with this. I used to think sales was like kind of skeezy, like kind of used car salesman kind of thing. And now I know it's not that. It's listening, asking questions, getting very, very curious, and getting invested in the result of your clients, of your customer. So to paint two scenarios here, if someone comes to me and they're like, I want to film this, we're opening a location and we're going to launch a bunch of balloons. Okay, you're going to post that on social media. That's fine. What happens after that? What's the end goal there? Instead, we can come back and say, okay, well, why don't we take that one video? We'll film that. We'll break that into Facebook ads in a social format. And then why don't we interview the manager of that new location to talk, get some team testimonials going. So there's so many different ways to utilize video, but we can't expect our clients to know that. They are not in our industry. They're not up on the latest information of, the best way to utilize video. That is our job. So I just want to call out and say, I love that you do that. That is very, very smart. The second thing was the packages. So you said that you listen, you evaluate, and then you present them 3 different options. The 3 package structure is so smart because they can look at that and say, okay, actually, I want the first one, which is exactly what I asked for. Okay, great. But then they also see the other opportunities for their business and for what they could do. And if you presented them with like 100 options, well, then they're going to get choice fatigue. If you present them with 2 options, well, then they're going to feel like it's like they're pitting them versus you, right? Like my idea versus your idea. When you present 3, it gives them the autonomy to kind of choose the path that's right for them without overwhelming them. Was that conscious to go with the number 3 there for the packages?
Yeah, I think I've done a bit of, not sure exactly. What's his face? Alex Hormozy gave me that kind of how to build a value, basically, how to build a $100 million offer. And he expressed this idea of there's kind of like 4 key structures that provide value. You know, there's the time urgency, there's added extras that they didn't expect. And I think that kind of added extras level to it, I really clicked with, because I'm thinking, you know, the client doesn't know what the client doesn't know, but they know their problems. And if you're able to say to them, well, like you say, the job is to understand those problems and then condense those problems into here's the specific solution videos they're gonna give you. So it's almost like you're saying, here's the solution number 1, here's solution number 1, 2, maybe 3, and here's solution 1 to 4 that you get as well, with all these added little solutions all along the way. So I don't view videos as videos. I view them as kind of the answers to their issues that they're going through all along the way. So it's kind of they're getting that explanation at the very end. And because it's in 3, you know, for them, if they're on a budget, they don't feel awkward by saying, oh, you know, we're going to go with package 1 now because, you know, we're happy with that. You know, that I don't want to make them feel as if you need to go with the big gold standard and blow your entire marketing budget out the window with me. No, because why would I want that? I don't want them to suffer. I don't, you know, I want them to go with what's reasonable. But at the same time, you know, the reason why I think a lot of creatives struggle is they don't give the client the option to buy big. Yeah. And when they have that option to buy big, you don't know necessarily what they're capable of spending. Maybe that gold standard is actually a drop in the bucket compared to what else they're spending on. You know, use that illustration about the balloon show. Maybe they're spending a good few thousands on balloons. Well, add in an extra 1,500 to 2K on social media content that's probably going to help them even more. Makes sense even more to them. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I think providing the 3 options positions you as the expert, but also gives them the comfort of choosing for them what's the right choice, not just what you think is right. Because if you just give them one option straight away, you know, you could be way off the mark.
Yeah. I love that. And because like when you give 3 options, each option is correct. Each option is a valid way forward, depending on the budget and depending on, you know, the time investment and stuff. But all of that, like they're all valid. So if they choose 1, great. If they choose 3, great. There's another thing that I wanted to touch on as well. So you mentioned, you know, when you do just a standard video, it takes about 3 months, which about matches what it was for our agency as well. But now that you are moving into this, you're splitting out a project into multiple months, and then you're also giving them the option to pay month over month, because as a business owner, you know, cash flow is, you know, that is something that needs to be managed. And even though you could essentially afford all up front, it would make things tight in other areas of the business. So giving someone payment options, I think is super, super, super smart. Like that's something I think all high ticket creatives should be implementing in their business. We've done this a bit. Like we typically will do like 50% upfront, and then the remainder we can either do in 1 or 2 payments after that. But if we were doing something that is like longer, like a 6-month retainer, then we would be able to structure things very differently. So I love that. The other thing that I wanted to mention here, this is something that took me a long time to figure out. It takes the same amount of effort to land a low-paying client who hires you for one small video as it does to land a high-paying client that wants to work with you in perpetuity forever. So if you are already putting in the time and the effort to land these clients, it makes way more sense to build a relationship with them, a long-term relationship with them, where you can learn about their brand in depth, where you can learn about like, okay, they like this style of lower thirds. They like this style of B-roll. They like this, like you can really integrate yourself with that brand. And then every video that's produced after that gets a little better and better, which has like a small psychological hook in it as well, because when someone works with you for so long and they're seeing such good results, it literally becomes painful to think of their business without you. So it absolutely is beneficial for your business, but it is also beneficial for their business as well. So there's all of what you said, just like it lit me up on all cylinders. I'm like, this dude gets it. Yeah, this is great. Okay, awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that? I know I just spit a lot of info at you, but does that all sound pretty much in line?
Yeah. Your thoughts on, when you've worked with a client long enough, it's painful for them to not use you or not have your content or use somebody else, right? I experienced this in a bizarre way. One of my main clients starting off was a brewery, a local brewery. They, in my head, were like a really cool brand, and they were growing and they were getting more and more, basically. And recently, the managing director left. He was my main contact, my main guy, and I was like, man, I'm gonna have to set up a new relationship, and you know what I mean? Like it was. Would I get the business again? Would the new guy come in? Would he already have other video teams that he's already got relationships with? You're asking all these questions over a good client that you love to work with, you love producing their content. Recently, that new managing director got his marketing guy to get in touch with me and organize a meeting. And the conversation basically was, we've already seen the content you've done with the brewery. The staff already know you and think you're fantastic. And we've got this big project that we're basically doing a promotional video now. And this is kind of there for me now, where it's like, all right, I'm going to have to learn a whole bunch of new stuff. The same feeling I got when I took on the new client for 300 quid, same feeling I've got now with this new project. But the fact is that even though it was a new managing director who got a new marketing guy, they still came back to me because of everyone else in that company already knew me, had a relationship, and they trusted me already. And I think that kind of speaks volumes to the fact that if you continually work with someone, yes, there's changing tides, and it's not always certain that you'll always work with them, but it's just that much harder for them to not use you if you've already got that solid kind of working foundation with them already. That's a privileged position you get when you go in on high ticket or high value clients. That's kind of really important to get as a creator, is those types of clients. Like you say, it takes the same amount of work and marketing and sales conversation, if not easier. It is probably easier because they're already like, yeses come easier for them, and no's are more easy to work around than someone who's low ticket and like, I'm not, That's kind of my experience so far. That's just happened recently with the old client. So we're moving on to doing a project with them, which is, potentially outside my comfort zone, but we're going for it, and it's well paid as well. And I think that speaks to the fact that you've got that original relationship to begin with.
That's amazing. Yeah, I totally agree. There's a couple other things that I wanted to talk to you about. So one of them is the illustration that you shared on LinkedIn, which breaks down how you take kind of one video concept and break that down into multiple. So the questions that I have around there is, one, I want you to kind of walk me through that, like what that is, what that represents, what that means. Two, I want to know like kind of how that plays into what you just said about like doing bigger projects now. And three, I want to know, maybe I'll save this one for afterwards, but I want to know what prompted you to share that framework, that visual on LinkedIn, because we chatted about this a little bit before we started on the recording, but Um, I think a lot of business owners or a lot of creatives, we have these kind of like behind the scenes frameworks that we use just to keep ourselves on track and like how we visualize things, how we structure things. But 9 times out of 10, nobody sees that. So when I saw you share it, I was like, that is a peek into his mind. And I love that. And that got attention, not just from other video business owners, but it got attention from potential clients or previous clients that I saw commenting underneath. So I think there's a lot of value in sharing stuff like that. A lot of people don't. So I'm curious why you did, but we'll get to that second. First, let's break down what that graphic represents, and I'll throw it up on the screen somewhere here. What it represents, what it means, and like just kind of walk me through that.
So what it means for me is the best way to communicate to the client what is possible with say 1-day production, maybe 2 or 3-day productions. What is possible? Because like we know, the client doesn't know what the client doesn't know. They might have an idea for a video, but after you've talked with them, they've got all these other areas which video could solve a problem. Now, usually we know the core type of videos which will always do well forever and ever because they're very based around, human psychology. So like a brand video, it's there to build trust. It's there to show that they understand the pain and problem of their customer and have the solution and care about the solution, and finishes off with, maybe a call to action, drives them to do a thing, right? That's a brand video. But then you need the social proof to prove that everything that they've just said is correct. So you use a testimonial, don't you? So you have a testimonial piece. Now, the beauty out of filming those 2 types of video, and if you're in the world of video production, is I found this, and I think to answer your question, really, I found that I ended up with way more content filming than was actually used in the final product. So, for example, when you're interviewing a client for their brand video, you go through the who, what, why, how of their business. I found I only used 25% of that actual interview footage in the final end result. And really, it should be that way because as a video creator, it's our job to condense down the client's video to make it really succinct, really simple, direct, impactful. That's the job. But it leaves you with a whole ton of not unvaluable content, just things that didn't necessarily make the cut. And so I often found this in my productions. I was delivering brand videos, I was delivering testimonial videos, but I was left with tons of interview content that the client was talking maybe about a specific story that happened in the business that went on for about a minute or so that didn't make the final cut, or they talk about something personal to them that didn't quite match the brand videos theme, but it's still, I found myself with all these like valuable pieces of content. I thought these need to be used because it's pointless them just being on my hard drive and no one else being able to see it. So I started to kind of upsell after the project. I'd deliver a brand video, deliver a testimonial content, and I'd say to them, look, I can make maybe 10 social media videos from the content we already have. And I didn't really have a necessary strategy at that point. I just thought social media, like it would be good for them to use on social media. So yeah, that's kind of where it started. But then I realized, hang on, this should be part of the core offering. Right from the beginning, they should have this clear idea that yes, they're getting this brand video or testimonial video, but alongside that, they have the option to get all this extra content. And the illustration I kind of use with clients in that discovery meeting when we were going through it is video content is a lot like meal prep. You have your main meal, you buy your ingredients for that main meal. It's kind of like the centerpiece of the whole occasion. But to make that experience even better, we can create extra side dishes, I don't know, dips, sauces, desserts from the ingredients that we've already bought, right? So we can combine all this to make the whole thing a lot more appetizing, not for you, for your customers. That's the kind of the way I try to explain it. Like it's all about, okay, you can buy all the ingredients, but rather than just throw them in the bin or let them go to waste, let's chop and chop them up and make lots of little separate side dishes that complement the whole kind of video strategy of your business. Basically, that's kind of how I lay it out. So I can explain all that all day long, but the simplest way is just to format a graphic or a way to just throw that up on the screen, either in the discovery call, but I definitely use it in the proposal afterwards. We have the discovery call, then we go through the proposal to go through what we've mentioned. But that's kind of where the graphic came from. And if I'm being completely honest with you, that graphic was actually inspired by another videographer who did something similar. I think it was on LinkedIn, but it only had like two videos that he made maybe 5 social media posts on. And I looked at it and I was thinking, hang on, I do that already, but I do it with kind of a bit of a wider range of content. So like brand video, testimonial, social media, stuff like that, or social paid ads. So yeah, that's kind of where it all came from, really.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much because I experienced the exact same thing after finishing a client project. There's so like, when we're interviewing them, we're there for like sometimes half an hour, 2 hours, getting them to talk and open up. And it is our job to condense that down into a maybe 1 to 2 minute asset that's punchy and, hits on the right points and flows well. So we have to leave a lot of great footage on the cutting room floor. And I wrestled with this all the time of like, but what are we going to do with this? Like, it's too good to just leave it there. And I ended up doing the same thing as what you described, like kind of pitching it afterwards of saying like, hey, I have this. We could make it into these assets. It could work like this, but it was very like kind of shots fired in the dark. Like, I don't know, like this wasn't what we agreed on, but here's all this stuff. And when you can take that and you're going to have that, and then instead bring that up in the discovery meeting and in the sales meeting and in the proposal, then not only are you still capturing that same footage, but you're also looking out for other things that you can grab to pull into that. One of the things that I used to do just as a way to re-engage clients after 6 months to a year is I would take, a couple of B-roll clips that didn't make it into the final product, and I would edit that into like a 10 to 15 second video background with no audio, darken it a little bit, and I would send it over and I would say, hey, like I was looking back through some old footage. I found these awesome clips that we didn't get to use. I thought I would put it together in a little video background. Here's a Google Drive link, here you go. And it almost always resulted in a re-engagement of that client in another paid project. And I think what you're doing is shortening that gap significantly and finding even more strategic ways to use those video assets. And then, instead of doing it after the fact, putting that in the beginning. And I think that is just, it's good. Like it's such good design. My girlfriend is Japanese, and they're very, very adamant about utilizing everything and, not wasting anything. And this is a great example of that, where otherwise that footage would just be gone. If they worked with someone else, they would still have that footage, but it would be on a hard drive somewhere in storage and not being seen by their customers. So absolutely love that. I think it's great. One thing I wanted to ask is, so you put this into your proposals, you put this into kind of your sales process. What was the strategy or the thought behind sharing it on LinkedIn? Because you kind of broke it down with some text as well and kind of walked people through it. Was this meant as like a sales piece? Was this meant as like an education piece for other video business owners? Like, what was the intention behind it? I'm very curious on that.
So it plays a part in a wider goal of mine for my social media content. And the value I get from social media, or at least posting specifically maybe on LinkedIn, Instagram as a close second, TikTok as like a third, I'd say. Facebook and YouTube Shorts, that's for another day. But, I would say my content strategy is to nurture my audience. It's not directly posted to expect leads and sales. That post, I put it out there. What I'm looking for is, yes, potentially new people who like it, new business owners or marketing directors or whatever, happy days. But what I'm really looking for is my clients that I'm already working with or have worked with previously, engaging with it and liking it. So like on that post, 3 or 4 original clients liked it. And so it leads me to potentially say to them, next conversation, or email them or have a quick follow-up with them and say, thanks for liking that post. Just wanted to mention that content that I mentioned in that post. I just thought of these ideas for you. Is it worth a chat? Is it worth something thinking about? That's my goal with my content, really, at this stage. It's to build an audience, because other people, other videographers, other creative owners, other business owners, or those in marketing positions will look at that and find value from it. Great. But what I really kind of drive for my business is it nurtures, it keeps the relationship strong with the clients I already have, and it keeps showing them extra value. So for example, I posted a video recently of the retainer plan that I had with the care home, right? The luxury care home. Straight after, a client of mine messaged me and said, hey man, just wondering how much that costs, like rough ballpark. He doesn't run a care home. The video content for that care home was very specifically designed for that business, but he understood the value of monthly content. And so that's kind of where he came back to me and was like, thinking about this for this other side business I've got going on. So that's a conversation we're now having next week. So that's my strategy with my content. It's to nurture my audience, not post it and expect people to DM me straight away saying, I want to buy your stuff, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And so the reason that I'm asking, like the strategy behind why you shared it, kind of a good example is this person that reached out to you after seeing the format of what you do for the retainer stuff. So sometimes it's not the end result that the client is impressed by. They're like, they see a video and they're like, oh yeah, I like that video, I want a video. Sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it is, they want to know that you have a system or a process or a framework that you use with clients to help them get results. And if you can communicate that, like a lot of video people or a lot of creatives, actually, a lot of business owners keep that stuff kind of hidden and they don't verbalize it. They don't communicate it. And I don't know if that's always the right approach. Sure, there's some argument to be had for we don't want to give away our secrets. But the thing is, there's only so many different ways to format and structure a video or a series of videos. Like if I figured out some like winning format, it's not going to be something that you wouldn't be able to figure out yourself, right? So if you take the opposite approach and you share what's working for you, what's working for your clients, how you do what you do, then you get people interested in that, interested in your process, interested in how your brain works, which is like the whole reason I'm jumping on this call with you, because ultimately people buy from people. They want to work with someone that they understand and they respect. So yeah, perfect answer to that. I think that's great. Okay, a couple more questions. I don't want to keep you all day. I could talk to you all day, but oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just one thing to add to that. Sorry, I know there's a slight video delay here, but I think just with what you've mentioned, I don't think video creators or those in the creative field withhold that because they're trying to keep it a secret. I think their challenges, and it's one I find, is explaining what you know in a simple way. It's really difficult to explain things simply and to condense it and to make it understandable, because we know what we know and we know how to make, things that have impact and mix logic with creativity and emotion and put it into video. That's a skill, but to actually communicate it and put it simply is really difficult. It's really hard. I struggle with it all the time. I'm always like trying to catch myself talking too much, trying to explain stuff. So I think the skill really is to learn how to explain things simply and to condense things down. And I think having frameworks like that, the simpler the better. And we sometimes get in our own head that we need to explain everything. We don't. We just don't. We just need to give them enough to make them learn something new once. Because if they learn something just once that's new to them, which is simple to us, but a little bit, oh, right, didn't get that. That's the job. That is the job. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I've had to learn quite a lot. I'm still learning right now. Every time I'm writing a post, thinking of a post, I'm like, Max, cut it down, like you do with your videos, cut it down, man. So yeah, that's kind of my kind of thought about how creatives go about it.
I think that is absolutely 110% on point. When I saw your visual breakdown of it, it's not a concept that I haven't done myself or thought about or seen done, but the way that you communicated it instantly, I was like, I get it. Not only do I get it, anyone who sees this gets it. So that is that. It seems like a simple thing. It's just a couple of boxes with some text, but it is very intentional to put that together and to make it that simple. And that is a difficult thing. I find it very difficult as well. So yeah, and seeing that post again was why I was like, what? Like, oh, that is gold. That's great. So, okay. There's a couple other things that I wanted to talk to you about. I could talk to you about this stuff all day. I feel like we have a lot in common. I feel like we see the world fairly similarly. So, but I will, in the sake of condensing it and keeping it wrapped up, I want to talk technical. So I want to ask you, what do you feel were the biggest skills that helped you get to this point in your video business? Like, obviously shooting video, editing, client communication maybe. But what do you feel are the skills that help differentiate you and have really kind of taken your business to the next level? What would some of those skills be?
Skills, that is a good question. I wouldn't put it down to skill. I'd put it down to qualities that I've had to learn. Anyone can learn skills, right? So skills are necessary to do the job, but there are people who earn very good money with less skills than I do doing the same thing. Like, and it used to annoy me. I used to see these like videos. I'd be like, all right, but how much you charge? I was like, man, I could have done that for like a lot less and done the same. Yeah, I used to get in my head about it, but I had to kind of settle to the idea that as skillful as you can be, I think what matters more are the qualities that you approach with the client. What's helped me elevate the business and elevate my kind of way of going about business is a few things. I think it's discipline and structure. I think they're two ones I've had to work on quite a lot. And in line with that, I've used certain processes to help me with that, to make sure that my brain is organized, basically, to help me structure my days out, to help me structure my workflows out, things like that. So yeah, discipline and structure have been ones I've had to work on, but also I think, and it sounds cliche, but I think empathy with the client and the customer comes number one. It doesn't matter what I do or how good I am at what I'm doing. If I can't show the client that I really understand them and what they're kind of trying to accomplish and almost get excited with them about the idea of what they're trying to achieve with their business, not just about video stuff, just about all sorts, you know what I mean? What else they might be trying, and showing that you really care about them as people, and showing that you really want to do the best job that you possibly can for them. That has helped massively. And it's not something that I've necessarily had to like learn. I've just learned the value of it more and more, and how to really show that more and more with my clients. So just the little things after we've done a project, sending a little thank you message, or even like with the care home, sometimes it's sending like a gift or something like that we've done with our previous clients with our kind of like branded stuff on there, just to be like, here's a thing, thanks for working with us, just to mention or shout about them on social media, or just little things have helped me build stronger connections. But yeah, I'd say empathy, and then discipline are probably the two that I've had to work on, but I've elevated my business up more and more.
Great. I would completely agree. There's one more that I think I would add for you based on our conversation today. You can tell me if this is off base, but and I would say that this is a quality, maybe not a skill, it's a quality that you have, and that is curiosity.
Right.
You are curious about your customers, where they're going to use the videos, how their business works. So one of the, I would say the common questions that I've seen in the Facebook group that we're in is, well, what if I don't know much about marketing? Yeah, because, you know, the videos are used in marketing and et cetera, et cetera. And I think my kind of default response to that is, well, if you have curiosity, well, then through that curiosity of learning about their business and learning how it works and learning how they get clients and what's working for them, what's not working for them, that will lead you to understand marketing. Mm-hmm. So if you have that base skill, that base, just that base quality of curiosity, then that will take you everywhere you need to go to build the empathy, to understand the client, to deliver them something that actually works for their business. And again, this is where something I've seen other agencies kind of drop the ball on. They're not curious. They get contracted for a video. They say, okay, they don't ask where it's going. They don't ask why. They don't ask any of these questions. They deliver the video flops. And then they don't work with that client again. And then they wonder why that is, because you need to be curious, and you have that in spades. I can see that. So would you say that's accurate?
It's funny when someone else says it to you, because you think maybe, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I would see someone like Justin, and I see like we say, we think on a similar lines, but like when I see someone like yourself, I'm thinking, man, he knows so much flipping more than I do, which is great. Because I think just having that mindset of that person has something specific that you don't have, appreciating it, and then taking notes of how you can kind of maybe adopt certain things that they do. Yeah, I think that's just a general life habit, I think, is really important to recognize. And there's a whole, we can really go into that specifically, but I think, like you asked for the business, how's it impacted my business? Curiosity is something that probably comes from originally, I wouldn't even say it was maybe insecurity, but just like, I'm not sure what I'm doing, so I need to know what I'm doing and figure it out. But also I've noticed the effort of being curious in the client and their life and their business and how they do things and how it runs and how it all works for them. The simple process of you getting to know that, they then trust you way more. They then think this person is in it for me, and they care about what I'm about, not just how much they're going to get out of me.
Totally agree. Okay. Another question I want to ask you about, this is more of a technical question, but this is something that people always want to know, the kind of nitty gritty details. Tell me, I think I'm going to make this maybe like a two-part question. The first one, it's tools and equipment. So I want to know what apps you use, like what software you use. You talked about organization and kind of mapping out your mind and your processes. So what software tools you use, and what hardware ecosystem you use for cameras, for audio. I know a lot of people don't care about this stuff. I'm a camera nerd. I kind of want to know about it.
Yep.
So yeah, just walk me through those two areas.
Yeah. So my system, I take, like, the way I organize my life is all on Notion. Notion is my baby, basically. And it's not something that I've had for a while. I've actually adopted it over the past 4 months. But it started off with me building a kind of a rough client management software in there, or CRM software in Notion, that I learned off YouTube, because everything I've learned technically is basically YouTube University, right? So I found a way to put a way to manage my clients and log them and understand, you know, interactions that we've had with them, tasks that we've got with them, and yeah, just making sure that I've got various notes related to each client. Maybe they've got an anniversary coming up or some event coming up. I need to just be in touch with them. I use Notion as kind of my hub for my business life, but also I've started using it for my personal life as a separate aspect. But from a business workflow, it's all through Notion.
Okay. And what do you use for billing and payments?
So I use Tide banking. So Tide is my kind of banking app. Again, something I've learned recently, but it helps me track all my payments and invoices. It does the whole shebang, and it allows them to it links up with Go Cardless as well, which is really good for retainer type clients because it bills them direct debit, which allows me not to have to be like, hey, send you an invoice, you pay. It just works. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. And what is your, I'm not sure if you're still doing kind of some editing yourself or if you have a contractor editor, but what video editing platform did you invest your time learning?
I use Premiere Pro. Now, this is not because I love Premiere Pro.
Okay.
It's just the devil right? The devil So it's one I know how to use. And I'm on the cusp of learning DaVinci. I'm so close, but with the way work is and just managing things, time is so important, right? So I know Premiere has its faults, but it's the one I learned on when I was in Thailand trying to edit some elephant engagement sanctuary video at 1:30 in the morning, and it's stalling on the laptop. And yeah, that's the one. That's the Premiere I know, not the one I've come to love, but it's just the one that I can breeze through and edit really quickly on. But I also use what's it called now? The one for the captions. Descript. There we go. Yeah, I use Descript is great for short form, for captions. I'm not massively like an expert at it, but I've got a pretty solid workflow now where from Premiere I can get it through Descript and sort it out there. So yeah, that's kind of the two core editing software that I use really.
Cool. Awesome. How do you deliver the files? How do you, is it like through Google Drive? Is it through, how do you deliver the files?
Yeah, I've got two methods to deliver files. The first, if we're going through the draft process, I'll use frame.io because that syncs up with my Premiere Pro Adobe account. But the good thing about frame.io is it allows them to review the draft, make notes on the draft, add their little input on there, but it doesn't allow them to download it because obviously that would bring a complication where they could just download the file or the first draft and run away without having paid the final installment, right? But most clients aren't going to do that. If you've got a relationship, it's not going to happen. Frame.io just allows you to have kind of a hub where they can make notes, add their say-so at timestamps. So by you giving them that task to do, it's made my process a lot more streamlined where it's not a back and forth in email. It's not, oh, can you just? It's in one place, all there laid out. And then once they're happy with the final video, we then use Google Drive to upload the various formats, social, master version for website, thumbnails, all that jazz, basically.
Perfect. Is there any phone or iPad or tablet apps that you use on set? Is there anything like that you've integrated into your production process?
You know what? I haven't. I've not used a phone or only for BTS, only for behind the scenes footage. I've used CapCut to a certain degree to edit short form content. But again, the devil I know is Premiere. So I'm definitely interested in learning a few apps, potentially for teleprompters or / monitor screens to kind of watch the camera as I'm directing or interviewing. So usually I've got a videographer on hand or a freelancer that does kind of the checks and gives me the say-so to say it's all framed up and we're good to go, but it would be nice. So yeah, that's my next little homework I need to do. Maybe with your help, Justin, eh?
Yeah, it's funny that the two that actually came to my mind were remote monitoring via like on an iPad and the tablet app. I've used the teleprompter numerous times and just loading it up and then giving the client the control so they can like go back and stuff.
I do lie.
It's
actually
definitely been super helpful. So
that's awesome. I have made a lie actually. I use the image Edge app for Sony. So I use that for my own content. So when I'm filming on my camera, I hook that up to my PC. I can see what's going on. I can control my camera settings and film my own content using the Imaging Edge software, remote control, basically. Yeah. So I do use external stuff. I nearly lied to you, mate. Sorry.
That's okay. Okay. So second part of this question. And I'm actually going to make this maybe, I want to add a third part here just to make it interesting, but briefly walk me through the hardware ecosystem. So you said Sony. What kind of gear are you using? Like, do you have specific bodies or specific lenses that you like go to, or is it just kind of a variety of Sony gear? Like, what does that look like?
So I base most of my gear around the Sony ecosystem. Again, it's not out of absolute loyalty to the brand or even to the technology. It's just the devil I know. It's the one I know. The best camera I believe you use is the one that you know. And I've learned Sony through and through. So, ironically, right now, a lot of the gear that I use is actually quite basic. It's not high end, because I usually bring on a freelancer who brings on his gear, who he invests in his gear to produce high quality content, which then I can bring on into the business. So from my end, I only use a Sony, I think A7 III, A7 500 for content, Sigma 35mm lens, I believe. Even now I'm scratching my head. I use a Rode mic as my audio kind of way to do my content, or potentially hook up with a client. But usually my videographer or freelance will bring on his A7S III, which is 10-bit color, 4K raw, all that good stuff. That's for the projects. But for my own gear, just simple little A7 6500 does me well. Little 35mm Rode mic, and off I go, all under £1,000, I think. So yeah, it kind of, I mean, maybe the goal is to reinvest in the gear for my own content, but at least for the client, when I bring on a videographer, they've got the high-end stuff to deliver the goods, basically.
Yeah, no, actually, the whole reason that I'm asking this question specifically is I know that you shoot client videos and then you bring in a team with their own gear and everything to kind of take those to the next level. But I see your content on Instagram, on LinkedIn. It looks great. It sounds amazing. And if you're like me, and it sounds like you are, like I'm not using the best like equipment or the best gear for that kind of stuff when I do it for myself. I'm just kind of using like whatever is available at hand. And it's usually not the latest and greatest. And I think I have a feeling that like sometimes gear can be our hindrance, where it's like, I will not make this video unless I have this, or I can't do this because I don't have that. And I completely agree with you. Whatever the tool is that you have on hand, you can make it work. And in your case, because I've seen your stuff, I've seen your content, looks great. And that loadout sounds pretty identical to mine, where it's like I use a DJI wireless mic, and I just like use like a crappy tripod, and I put it up, almost zero lights. I just like go for it.
Yeah.
And I get more comments on that kind of stuff than I do sometimes like my client videos when I share them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I completely agree with you. It's not always like the gear or reinvesting in the gear. It's more about, making it accessible and easy to use. Okay. So secondary question. Did you start by bringing on videographers, or in the beginning, was it just you shooting and editing?
Yeah, that was all me.
Okay. So I want you to go back to that first year, and I want you to give me your 80-20 gear purchases. So maybe I'll go first to kind of set some context. So if I had to go back and I had to start from year one, I think a lot of videographers go through this stage where they buy a ton of stuff, and probably 80% of it doesn't get used, or it was unnecessary, or it was like they spent a lot of money and it had very little impact. So if I could go back to me from year one and be like, hey, I know you have gear acquisition syndrome. I'm going to save you a ton of money and a ton of time. And here's the things that you're going to use the most on every single shoot. They're maybe not the most glamorous, but for me, it was the A7 III, which is what you already described. It It was a tripod that was like a little heavy. It was an external light and a softbox, so like what you have right there. It was a wireless mic, a shotgun mic, and that was like pretty much it. I could have, like, looking back, I could have done the majority of my projects with just that. If I had to give like a bonus one, I would say probably like a DJI mini drone, just something to get up in the air, and a basic gimbal. The reason I would say those two, not just because of what the footage looks like, but one thing I didn't expect was what the clients would feel when I bring out certain gear. So whenever I brought out a gimbal, clients would be like, oh, wow, what's that fancy, crazy thing? I've never seen anything like that. Same with the drone. They don't know that it's, you know, like the base level DJI, but they're like, wow, that thing's up in the air. And the last one I'll say is a Pelican case. So from a tactical perspective, you know, not lugging around a bunch of backpacks was good, but it was way more impactful for clients seeing me come on set with these Pelican cases and them being like, damn, like I hired the right person. If I would have known that, I would have bought those Pelican cases first, but I like didn't, because I was so stubborn. I'm like, I don't want to spend $600 on a case to bring my camera. So those would be like, if I had to start my agency over again, if there's someone watching this and they're like, yeah, I want to start my own agency, it would be those. The lens, 24-70. That's it. Camera, and those pieces. What would some of your 80-20 kind of like big lever purchases be for you if you had to start all over?
Editing computer. Now, for the client facing, you can buy a chunky tripod and you can rig up your camera to make it look bigger than it actually is. But in terms of sheer impact on my business and my ability to work, having a computer that just edits quick, like just does the job. Because you can always, I think with gear, you can buy mid-tier now at a reasonable amount, right? You can purchase gear, but your editing software is only limited to mid-tier if you buy mid-tier. You know, and even then it might struggle to a certain degree. If you're messing around with 4K and you try to color grade it, and you're dealing with large file sizes and you're wanting to improve your gear, then you're going to have to, every time you buy a new camera, you're going to have to buy a new editing software, or not editing software, sorry, editing PC. So my laptop like broke because I just ran the thing into the ground. It cost me like $2K. It was a XPS 1950, I believe, with like Windows machine. It was good, did a certain amount of work, but after using those fans and after using the processor for a year and a half straight, it just grinded to a halt where it would turn off, it would heat up, it would slow me down. I wanted to throw it out the window multiple times. So I literally was forced into buying a desktop PC, and that is just, like 8 cores, 64 gig of RAM. It just flies. And that has had a massive impact on my business. And it's not cheap, but if you're able to buy an editing software, you can scale your equipment up to that rather than having to play catch up with the gear, if that makes sense. So that's helped me just pump out edits a lot quicker. And it's just, when you're working on an edit, the worst thing in the world is stop, start, because you need to get into flow state, don't you? Because once you're in flow state, it's a wonderful place to be. 3 hours go by quickly, and by the end of it, you've got a product which you're really proud of. If you're editing, or if your computer's crashing or not loading or just won't do the job, stop, start, you get really frustrated, and the end product doesn't really feel as good, I guess. But yeah, I'd say probably start there, and then you can work your equipment up to that.
I think that's a perfect answer. And I completely agree. When people hear editing PC or editing computer, I don't know if it's immediately like clear. The biggest thing that you're getting there is time savings, and you're getting into a flow state. You're able to deliver quickly. You're able to pump out content quickly. You're able to, I completely agree. When I finally upgraded to a MacBook, and it just went through everything I threw at it. I was like, all I could do was think to myself, how many hours have I waited for things to render in, in the past, where now that's something, if I had to start all over again, I would definitely invest in the editing rig for sure. Okay, so last couple questions here. You talked to me a little bit about your process and like kind of how you grew things. I want you to kind of take that same format of like, what were like the big things that you did to grow the business? So as a business owner, we throw a bunch of things at the wall and we see what sticks. Sometimes things work and sometimes things don't. Is there any kind of client acquisition strategies or things that you've tried that have worked better than the others? And then is there anything that you've tried that maybe didn't work as well for you, even though they've worked for other people? What were some of those like the winners there and the ones that didn't work out so well?
Ooh, I think if you're starting off, then the number way to, I think, get new business is through outreach. Now that's just my personal opinion, but I remember watching a video of how you did outreach, maybe about a year ago now, a year and a half ago, but specific video outreach videos that are tailored to that person. You address them by name, you share what you appreciate about the business, what you've noticed that they could do with video, and if you'd like to have a conversation, here's the next step. It's not a simple well, it can be a simple process, but for me, that's been one of the highest I don't know what the word is, maybe the highest impact ways to market my business, which is finding someone specifically with their email address or their LinkedIn and sending them a video that explains your value has been a massive return on, I guess, time to a certain degree. But it really depends on the type of clients that you're going to do it with and the types of businesses that you're going to do it with, because it's only worth your time and effort if you're targeting the right types of business, which are usually high ticket. So that's been my experience, that I've tailored that method, tried and tested it. And yes, it's a numbers game, but it's a quality game. So you gotta find the rhythm that suits you. And for me, I tend to leverage quality more than quality more than quantity, simply because I will produce, relatively a high-end outreach video, but I'll follow up. My follow-up game is borderline obsessive. But the point is that if it's high quality enough, by the time they watch it, they'll get it. And if not, no worries. But by doing that, I've converted some of my highest paying clients into long-term customers. And every 10 videos that you send out, 8 might not get a response, 3 might, 1 turns into a client, but that client then becomes a client for the next 2 years. So the 10 that you spend time doing, it all adds up. So yeah, that's been kind of my process. The one that hasn't worked out as well as I thought of was networking. Now, I know networking does work, and I think it does suit some people's personality really well, especially if you're part of like an organized, quite structured one, maybe BNI or maybe another one. It does absolutely work, and I don't disagree it works. For me, the way I run my life, at the time investment and I feel like this notion of being in a room of people who are trying to sell you stuff while you're trying to sell them stuff at the same time, it doesn't make me feel necessarily uncomfortable, but I find it a little bit long-winded. Whereas I could spend that entire time just finding 5 people that I specifically want to talk to and get in their inbox or DM them and just go straight for it and provide that value straight away, rather than kind of half selling, if that makes sense. But that's my experience with networking. I'm not saying it hasn't worked. I've got clients from networking. However, I'm not able to control who they are. I'm not able to really qualify them. And there's a slight emotional, I think what it comes down to is the emotional, like leverage that is kind of there, where if someone gives you a lead, it's like, right, you've got to go for it. Otherwise, why are you here? Whereas I'm like, well, is the lead qualified?
Yeah.
Can they afford me? Can they do even get on? Like, there's all this that kind of plays a part. And so specifically networking hasn't really worked for me, but I do my bit. I do a bit of a networking, especially social networking, where it's more you go for an evening with a few drinks or something like that. That's much preferred to me than right, once every Friday morning at 7 a.m. we do this every single week. It's not really for me, but I know it does absolutely work for some.
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree, and it was the exact same in my business as well. Like, I remember in the first year of my business, I set everything up. I set the website up, and everything was good. And then I was like, okay, what do I do now? When did the customers hire me? What's going on? And I first started by going to networking events because I was told, okay, that's the thing that you do. I went to a like one or two, and I brought my cards, and I was excited to pitch myself, and I literally couldn't because everyone was pitching me their stuff, and I was like, this is not gonna work. Like, this is, I think for certain people, like, they can really thrive in that environment. I'm a bit of an introvert, so I'm like going in there like trying to be a salesperson and like pitch myself, and the whole thing just didn't work for me. Like you said, there's lots of people that can make it work for them. It just wasn't right for me and my business and my lifestyle. The thing that did work was I remember going home after one of these networking events and being like, I don't think I met one person there that I would want to work with. And then I was like, well, who do I want to work with? Like, what is my goal for this? Like, who am I trying to spend time around? And I remember I took a bunch of sticky notes, and I went on like Google Maps, and I was like, I don't even know what businesses are around me. I should start looking on Google Maps. And I looked up all these different businesses, and I started putting them on my window of like, would love to work with them, would be okay working with them, and like probably wouldn't, like, not really interested. And then I had this like, these categorized businesses that didn't know that I existed. And I was like, well, they were now the networking event, so how can I let them know that I exist? And I was like, damn, I have a camera right here. Why don't I use it? I just hooked it up to my computer, recorded some quick reach outs. And like you said, not every one of them works. I would say the majority of them either doesn't get seen or doesn't get a response. But the ones that did worked so well that it was like some of the best ROI time that I could have spent, where I was like, okay, if I can dedicate an hour to do this once a week and one person responds back and they're like kind of blown away by it, that was worth the time investment for me. This led to direct sales, like direct jobs. I'm sure it was the same for you, but it also led to a lot of referrals where one of the biggest pieces of marketing is just letting people know that you exist, just subtly reminding them that you exist. It's not necessarily to convince every single person that sees your video to hire you. So if John down the street sees this introduction from me and now he knows that I do video, well, over the next couple of weeks, if someone asks John, hey, do you know anyone that does video? Well, he's probably going to think of me and be like, oh yeah, I was introduced to this Justin guy. He sent me an email. So super, super, super high value. With that being said, it is kind of nerve-wracking to put yourself out there, record yourself, pitch yourself to someone who's never heard of you. You don't want it to come off as spam. You don't want to be too salesy. How did you find that balance of like, it sounds like you got into a bit of a rhythm there. Did you find it difficult in the beginning? And how did you tailor it so that it wasn't as salesy or spammy?
Got you. Let me just plug my phone in. Bear with me.
Yeah.
How did I not come across salesy or spammy? I'm not. I mean, so for me, I'll give you a little kind of background of my life other than video. So a lot of my video work is split part-time. So I do this maybe 3.5 days a week. So again, I didn't want to build a massive business. I just wanted to support the life that I had, right? So a lot of the work I spend is involved in a Christian education work. So I've learned how to present stuff to people who don't care what I have to say all the time, like nonstop through my entire life. So rejection and people who don't want or don't care for it, I'm okay with that. But I've learned across that time how to present something as a conversation, as to open up ideas rather than get this from me or choose this. So in my outreach videos, everything's about giving them something to begin with. You got to give them something to begin with. You can't just be like, take, listen to me. Why should they care? So I think the very first part of my outreach strategy is to compliment them on the business, say something specific that I think they're doing really well, and then look at very specific, maybe areas which I've not seen before, which they do specifically well. So like recently, a construction company that I reached out to converts castles into hotels. I mean, that's just asking for that's just asking for someone to send something to them. But
that's so cool.
Yeah, exactly. So when I saw that, I was like, I got to mention this. And across their business, they're doing all sorts of interesting construction work, right? So perfect compliment. This is what I think you're doing amazing. You've clearly done, this type of project before. You're experts in what you do. I love it. By the way, I wanted to reach out to you because, I want to work with amazing businesses who do amazing things. I just thought that with me doing video, I thought of this idea that could potentially do this for your business. And I thought of this as well. And what I've done is I've done this with these people before, and it's brought them this kind of result. If that's something you've ever thought about, then I'd love to explain what I'm thinking and see if it makes sense for you. If not, no worries either way. I'll continue supporting you. That's the spiel. That's the kind of script, as it were. But it's tailored to basically say, you're already amazing. Like, I'm not here to come in and be like, right, you need fixing. It's, hey, I appreciate this. I'd love to show what you're good at. And it kind of shifts the dynamic a little bit. I think some go into sell as, you're not doing good enough without me, or why aren't you using video because everyone else is. Like, no one buys that way, but they do listen if you're here to say, you're already doing great, how would you like to be even better? So that's kind of my tactic with my, I guess you could call it script, but it has a framework. Like we talk about frameworks, it's a framework of the conversation of how I use video. But on top of that, I use bits of B-roll from all projects. I'll throw up their website. I'll throw up recent projects that I've done as images. So yeah, that's kind of my approach to making it hyper personalized, but not so much where every video is different. It's got the same format, so I can kind of get through it, edit it in a quick enough time frame, basically.
Amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. It also, side note, I love how the previous experience that we have in our careers and our lives, you don't always know the kind of steps to go forward. Like people think that it's like linearly up like this. You don't really see the line between the dots until you look back, and then you see how it all connects. So for you to have the experience that you do, and like you said, like I'm used to people pitching people things that they the rejection thing is not so much a big deal to me, but you said something specifically about you open up ideas that they might not have had before, and you present them in a non like kind of judgmental way, and you validate them kind of going into it. You say what you like about them, and then you open ideas that they might not have thought about, and then you end it off by saying, whether or not we work together, that's kind of irrelevant. I will still be rooting for you either way. I think that is like the perfect kind of like way to approach that, because then that way, whether they say yes or say no, each way is valid. If they say yes, then it's great. If they say, oh, actually, I don't need anything, but thanks, like each way they can't go wrong. So I really, really love that. And having this conversation with you has solidified that I just love the way your brain works. I wish we lived closer so we could go grab a beer.
I know, man. Yeah, take it to the brewery or something. I learned, to be fair, I've learned quite a fair bit from yourself. Like the way you structured your videos to begin with, like your outreach strategy, I was like, perfect. Like that's the format I get and I can understand it. And then it's just tweaking to your own style. And I think we sometimes we look at things and we think, how do I copy and paste this exactly? Because they get these results exactly. But people don't buy from absolute scripts. Like you said, they buy from people. So you got to tweak it, change it to suit your personality. Just because someone else can, some people are really good at selling as a little bit of a hard sell. Like that's just their personality, maybe. Doesn't work for everybody. Not the way I would do it. But they have a massive following because they are like that. You look at real estate agents and the way they do stuff, they're just like, bam, bam, bam. Do you know what I mean? And like I look at, for example, my wife's culture in America and the way they sell, it's so different to over here, but it works. That's how it works. You got to tailor things to how it adapts to your circumstances, your culture, how people think. But generally, coming across as, we throw this word authentic and sincere, but just that you appreciate them and that you think that they're already great goes a long way. I think it goes a long way because it opens up the door for them to actually let you in a bit and then lowers the barrier down rather than, hey, I noticed that you don't have this. Would you be interested? You know what I mean? No, like the amount of emails we get like, hey, great website. I noticed that. I don't. Straight in for the kill. Whereas more often than not, most people want it now as a conversation and to feel validated and to even be suggested something that they've not thought about before, but they've got to be open to that a little bit beforehand. So yeah, I kind of learned that at the baseline from yourself, from what you did in the group as well.
Well, I think one thing you mentioned that I just want to call attention to is like, you mentioned so like the kind of base framework, you took it and then adjusted it to what worked with you and your experience and what, how you do things. And I think that is like the key. So this project that I'm working on is called Frameworks, where I break down other people's frameworks, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. But it is not designed so that you just look at someone's exact framework and be like, okay, I will copy word for word for word. It's more you take that information and you pick out the parts that resonate for you. You merge that with what you know in the world and your skill set, and then you make something unique. And that is how almost all art is created. It comes from an idea, then it's remixed and it's made into something original. And I can tell that you've definitely done that. The other piece there that I wanted to touch on, and I think this goes back to the curiosity piece, where when you say something about the business that you like or that you admire, or you give them some kind of, their props in the beginning, I would wager a big bet that when you say that, it is completely authentic and you actually are impressed by that because, you're doing your research on them, you're curious, you're looking into it. And then when you're saying like, I noticed this thing and like, I actually like the way you're doing this and I think this is really cool, I'm 100% positive that that is authentic because that comes from your curious place and that comes through in the video. And I think that goes back to like, that's something you can't really maybe teach. You can teach someone the words, but like you need to have that curiosity and you need to be, you're putting yourself out there, being willing to invest your time into reaching out to them, into calling out something that you appreciate. That needs to come from an authentic place. Cause if it is not authentic, that will come through on the video and then you're just wasting everyone's time. So yeah.
I mean, I'd add to that. I'd say, look, I would say a challenge I have, and it's one I've had to kind of moderately come to terms with, is if I've not worked in an industry or with a specific sector before, and I'm reaching out because I want to get into that sector, you might want to say things that you're not quite sure of because you're not sure exactly what their challenges are until you start having a conversation with them. You're not really sure what their specific problems might be. But it's better than nothing. Like it's better than not sending them anything. And it's better than just sending them a little kind of direct email or direct message. Even though that does work to a certain degree, sending a video message, I think, has that added value of you. They see your face, they see who you are. But the fact that you're actually putting in some effort to just say hi, you're going to stand out way and above and beyond anybody else, right? And like you say, even if they don't choose you, they're still going to remember you if they watch that video. They're not going to forget who you are if you send them something personalized. So you don't have to have like this. I don't necessarily think you have to have this epic like understanding of their industry and know specific problems. That's fantastic. And it's helped me a little bit now with other industries that I reach out to that I've kind of done work before. I can be more specific. But just the act of showing up, being there, explaining that you like something about them, even if you don't have immense knowledge of their business or industry, and then sharing just even if it's a general video idea or here's this idea I had to share with you, that's more than enough, I think, than just doing nothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely agree. I completely agree. Okay. I want to get this going. I told you this would be an hour, and we're obviously extending the time a little bit.
Man.
There's two, there's two more quick questions that I wanted to ask you. So the first one is risks and pitfalls. So if you were to go to yourself, if you today were to go travel back in time and talk to you who's just starting off the video business, I think one of the things you would say is like, hey, just so you know, there's ups and downs, there's peaks and valleys to this whole freelancing thing. Just so you know, this is like a potential risk to be aware of. Is there any potential risks or pitfalls that you're seeing so far with like pitching these bigger projects, like the multi kind of month things like that? Is there any risks and pitfalls that you're seeing so far, or anything that's caught your attention so far?
Not understanding the scope of work that's necessary to complete the thing. That's caught me out a few times, but it still does. I'm getting better at it, but just understanding the amount of work necessary involved with saying, oh yeah, 3 videos a month. Yeah, sure, easy. It's not always easy. You got to reschedule, you've got to plan things, you turn up on the day and the client hasn't got ABC sorted out for you, and you realize, oh, you should have clarified that beforehand. There's all these kind of minute areas that you need to kind of, you say, could you go back to yourself and say, by the way? So half me would say, yes, that would be great. But the other part of me is, well, by experiencing that enough, you kind of understand all the little things you need to kind of organize before you start offering these productions or monthly retainers. Keeping things as simple as possible is probably one of the biggest things I'd say to myself. Like, keep it simple. Do not over promise. Even though you're going to deliver, don't over promise. Thinking that you can do 5 videos a month, 10 videos, just thinking that doesn't relate to reality. You need to start simple, start small. Even if it means you got to charge less, just start small, because then you understand what's necessary and what's involved. So the next person that comes around, you can then charge them accurately and understand the scope of work involved and feel really comfortable doing that. Because I find in the world of, and this doesn't just relate to video, but in creative businesses as well, like there's this place where you've got so much work to do where you didn't charge well enough for it, and it's a miserable place to live, isn't it? It's not fun, because you want to love doing the thing, but you just can't, because you haven't got value from it, from the price that you quoted, because you didn't know what was all involved. So yeah, I think just start as simple as possible, even if it means charging less, so you understand the scope that's involved. That might not be popular, but I understand now that I can charge well because I understand how to deliver well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. That's a really good tip. Okay. The last question that I wanted to ask you about is if you have any resources that you have learned from on how to like kind of structure these, if there's any videos that you've watched on how to kind of do this transition, to do these retainer type packages. And to add to that, as an extension of that, is there anyone that you watch or that you follow that you feel you get a lot of value from, just kind of consistently? You mentioned Alex Hormozy. Is there any other resources that you could point people to like that?
Christo's been kind of a North Star guide for the past 3 years for me. He touches on the video business world, but more than that, he's a designer by heart, but an absolute entrepreneur in his brain, and he understands the struggles and pains, but is able to explain mindset challenges you have, logistical challenges you have, and how to structure a business that actually makes money, and why it's important you need to do things which are scary, and how to do things that are scary. I think he's been fantastic. Alex Hormozi, just as someone who is able to condense, there's a lot involved in what he goes on about, but I think how to condense and understand how to position yourself as someone who has breaking down value, basically, because everyone uses this word value, right? Provide value, value this, value that. What he's able to do is pull it all apart and explain all the nuances and all the parts that add up to something that's valuable and why it's valuable, and add math to all that good stuff. So he's brilliant at doing that. And then I would follow, there's a podcast I've been listening to recently that's been really good. Let me just try find it on Spotify. Bear with me.
Sure.
Creators with Coffee. No, Creators Grab Coffee. They're video producers and videographers, two American lads who kind of interview, a bit like yourself now, who kind of bring in various people around the world to their podcast and explain their story about video production, and from people who do high-end commercials to monthly retainer gigs, things like that. So yeah, they're a good listen to. I think that's it off the top of my head right now. I need to do some more reading, to be honest with you, Justin. Like, I need to read Atomic Habits, Business of One. That's my to-do list. But like, in terms of video, if I was being completely blunt, YouTube University has been my kind of go-to for most of my 3-4 years of doing this. Like, at the end of the day, if you've got an issue, you've got a problem, there's someone on the internet who's going to break it down for you and explain that. But at the same time, there's a little bit of a trap that I've fallen into many times, which is the analysis paralysis, kind of just consume, don't do. So there's a little bit of kind of warning, I guess, with that for me to put out there, which is, as much as you consume all, Christo, Alex Hormozi, podcasts, all this stuff, happy days, you can feed off it, brilliant. But there's only one way that's really going to like just impact your business, which is just testing. And along the way, you're going to find a rhythm that suits you, and then you tweak it further and further. But yeah, just go in for it, basically. Half the time doing scary stuff has been the biggest lesson, I'd say. That's the number one.
I completely agree. And these are great recommendations, Christo, Alex Hormozi. I'm going to check out that Creators Grab Coffee podcast. That sounds great. And I totally agree with you on the YouTube University. I've had little cousins, and even my sister come to me and ask like, hey, so I'm thinking about going to university for this, or I'm thinking about going into college for this. And I'm finding myself kind of conflicted where, I went to school, and it was a big investment of time and money. I went to school for graphic design, and I learned more on the internet before going to school for graphic design. I learned more about graphic design on the internet than I learned in college. And if anything, I feel like the college experience was great. Being a student with other students was great. But I feel like if I would have just kept learning the way that I was learning, I probably would have went much further, faster. So I cannot stress how important YouTube University is. Just, all the people out there putting stuff out there. And this video will be out there. Like, as we talked about before we started recording on this call, people like us have conversations like this all the time, just kind of internally, just kind of, one-off. And I think there's value in making some of those conversations public and putting that out there. There's people that definitely don't know about retainers and about what that looks like and how to transition. And I know that this stuff would be very valuable for them. So I just wanted to end this off by saying, dude, thank you so much for joining me on this little interview, this little journey. I really appreciate it. It's been so great to finally connect with you and chat with you. Is there anything that you wanted to end off with, or should we just wrap it up?
You know what I want to, I think in the creative space, what's wonderful is everyone is most likely, most people in this space are great with each other. They learn off each other quite willingly. And when we talk about competition, I don't really feel that in our space, which is a cool thing. That's how I feel. Maybe that's because of my location and how it is, but even within my zone, it's fun. It's so good being able to understand from others their story, their perspective, their challenges, their setbacks, how they've coped with it, because it all links up somewhere, and you're going to find something that kind of meshes together. And think like with yourself, you've obviously been an expert in teaching some really specific key takeaways from your video business, which I've taken, tweaked myself, and that's kind of how it works. No one should be really copycatting each other, but we kind of learn off each other, but then tweak it ourselves. And I think like doing this, it makes it, well, for me doing this kind of thing, it kind of reaffirms when I'm saying things or explaining how I see things. It's great having someone like yourself feedback and think, yes, that clicks or that makes sense. I'm like, oh, that's great. It's not just a load of rubbish in my head half the time. But yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully we can do a couple more of these. Actually, I might have to organize one with you now, mate. I might have to swing it around on you and have all the editing time for me.
Yeah, hit me up. I'd be happy to chat again. All right, well, cool. That's the pod, and yeah, take care.
Happy days.